Thank you for joining me on this adventure with Tales from the Creek Bed. If you enjoy what you see and want to help my channel grow, please take a moment to hit the like and subscribe buttons. Your support signals to YouTube that you want to see more engaging content like this. For those craving even more original stories infused with nostalgia and fandom, I highly recommend checking out my book, The Horror Club, A Trip to the Video Store. Set in the vibrant 90s, it follows a passionate group of young horror fans as they battle to save their beloved video store from extinction. You can easily grab a copy on Amazon or listen to it on Audible. Now, let's dive into the adventures waiting for us at the creek bed. I can't recall when Stephen King wasn't a part of my life. By the time I was born, he'd been a consistent presence in pop culture for nearly 10 years, with the release of his first novel, Carrie, which happened to be one of my mom's favorite movies. One of the first movies I can recall watching as a kid was Christine.
To leave this one alone, she could tell right away that I was bad to the bone.
I can remember seeing his commercials on television between episodes of Thundercats when I was a child.
Thundercats will be back after these messages.
It's back. It's more frightening than before. Stephen King's epic The Stand. Experience the terror of 350 pages you weren't allowed to see before. This $24.95 hardcover is yours for just $7.95 when you enter the chilling world of the Stephen King Library.
Hi! Do you know what scares me? People who don't use their local library. Actually, it's a great place for everything.
Firestarter was a movie that when it came on television on Saturday afternoons, I would stop everything I was doing just to watch it. His miniseries, Tommyknockers, and It were events all to themselves. Especially It. That clown was the stuff of nightmares. But it wasn't just the movies that captivated me. King's books had an equally profound impact. When I was 10 years old and developing into my own as a horror fan, the Monster Squad was my guide. If their leader, Sean, was going to wear a t-shirt declaring Stephen King ruled, then it was official. Stephen King ruled. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Jeremy Campbell. I am a director, an author, and a photographer. This is my story, Tales from the Creek Bed. The year was 1996. I was 12 years old. I had just finished reading Jason's Curse from the young adult Friday the 13th book series, and was convinced it was the greatest thing I had ever read. My best friend and horror guru, Donnie, a year and a half older, had graduated from young adult horror like R.L. Stine and Friday the 13th novels and was reading King. His particular favorite was The Shining, a well-worn paperback he carried everywhere. He challenged me to make that my next read. Little did he know that the book would be a lifeline during what was about to be one of the most challenging periods of my life. Shortly after Donnie lent me the book, my family was evicted from a trailer that would be condemned due to structural issues not long after, sending us into 6 months of vagabond living. In the next 12 months, I would change schools 6 times and move 5 times. The book itself was a challenge, a large leap in substance and literary standard. As we moved from one family member's house to the next, I brought the battered and worn paperback with me. Most of our possessions were in storage. The only things we had with us were what we could carry, which for me meant a few sets of clothes, my boombox, a few CDs, and The Shining. For a few months we had to live with an aunt and uncle who lived deep in the country, miles from even a gas station or a single other house. They lived in a 3-bedroom trailer with their adult daughter, her daughter who was 3, and my elderly blind grandmother. My mom, my older sister, my brother, and I slept on their living room floor. Every adult in the house smoked, and the only thing my aunt and uncle ever seemed to watch was true crime dramas on Lifetime.
Somebody said, let's let Marina Silver do this role.
For lunch?
What you want as an actor is to be able to come in and do something completely different.
He's always there following me.
This is the first time I'm carrying something.
Not going to work today.
And that's exciting.
So most women don't file a lawsuit because they're scared. Tim.
Then I'll be the exception. Hostile Advances, the Carrie Ellison story, a Lifetime original movie. Premieres Monday night at 9 on Lifetime, television for women.
To escape the horror of my reality, I would take my boombox, my handful of CDs, and my weathered, cherished copy of The Shining and go outside to read. It was winter, but despite the cold outside, I would still rather be out there than in the cramped, smoke-filled confines of my uncle's trailer, with the TV at full blast, showing dramatic reenactments of terrible real-life crimes. I finished The Shining while I was living there, and returned to the world of young adult horror with the obscure but fun, pulpy horror high novel Sudden Death, but soon after, I found myself returning to King with Thinner because of the remote location of where I was living. Something as simple as a trip to Walmart felt like an excursion to a far-off desired location. My favorite section was the book section. This was years before Audible, Kindle, or Amazon. If you wanted to read a book, you had to purchase or check out an actual copy of the book. The book section in a Walmart was the size of a small bookstore itself. I would park myself there while my mom did her shopping, reading the back of each Stephen King novel and thumbing through the books, trying to take in as much as possible before being called away by my mom. Money was so tight that my mom buying a book for me was out of the question. But it wasn't King's writing that led me down my creative path. Not entirely, at least. It was a much simpler combination. One of the rare times I came inside my uncle's house to willingly sit and view what was on television was the Stephen King episode of Biography on A&E. It wasn't the fame and fortune that came with being a writer that sparked my interest. It was him talking about growing up poor with a single mom in a rural area, and how reading and writing got him through that period of his life. The title of his first story struck a chord with me. I was a teenage grave robber. Hilariously, that was the type of story I felt like I could write. The next thing that caught my attention was when they showed his house. Holmes had a way of piquing my interest, considering I did not have one. And King, well, he had a house that I could only dream of. Not that it was huge, stately, or state-of-the-art. It was just freaking cool. It had a cast-iron gate with bats. The next thing that I focused on was the photo of King on the back of his paperback editions. It was a simple, black-and-white photo of the man himself, sitting at his workspace, feet propped up with a simple pen and a worn pad of paper in his lap. I loved that picture. I wanted to be the man in that picture, sitting in my stately Gothic home, filled with my own oddities. Metallica played in the background, while I jotted down ideas for my next story. We eventually moved away from that uncle's house and moved in with the next uncle. This one was a hard-right conservative Christian, with 8 kids and no tolerance for my ungodly music and books. I was cast away to the dusty, cluttered garage, which was about the only place I could go to be alone, considering all his kids. I had just finished Thinner and had no money for another book, so I was back to reading The Shining for a second time in less than 6 months. That well-worn second-hand paperback was becoming the equivalent of the rubber ball that Steve McQueen bounced off the wall when he was confined to solitary confinement in The Great Escape. Once we moved away from there and into the personal hell that I called Cleburne, Texas, it was my used and abused copy of The Shining that I took to school with me. It served as a shield during homeroom and recess on the cold, empty playground, blocking me from the scornful gazes of the other students, who disdained me for being new to the school, having long hair, and wearing t-shirts from heavy metal bands like Metallica and Slayer. As I mentioned in the previous episode, one of the benefits of Cleburne was the used bookstores. One of them was a crumbling, piss-soaked brick building that also served as the living quarters of the local hermit. This was less of a bookstore and more of the public collection of a hoarder. But he was a generous hoarder who would sell me books on credit, and a lot of times for $1 or less. These books included first-run editions of Stephen King paperbacks. Once I was kicked out of school and sent to the Alternative Learning Center, I got my fill of King. With nothing to do but read all day, that was what I did. Misery, Cujo, Carrie, Firestarter, Salem's Lot, and Pet Sematary. The town of Cleburne looked like the backdrop for King's stories, with its massive town cemetery, surrounding woods that cut the town off from the outer regions, the abandoned Victorian homes, and all of the bizarre country folk who declared themselves more righteous than those heathens in the far-flung cities. In hindsight, it was never my goal to just be an author, or to just be a movie director, or to ever become a photographer. It was my dream to be a storyteller. And I owe that dream, in so many ways, to Stephen King. Thank you for taking this trip with me, down to the creek bed. What is your favorite Stephen King story? Comment down below, in the meantime. I'm Jeremy Campbell, reminding you, don't be scared to be yourself.